Simon Gedder is a cattle farmer in Queensland in northeastern Australia. He says taking care of his herd is getting harder because of frequent bouts of extreme weather. Earlier this year, 300,000 cattle were killed in floods, and wildfires have caused losses worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Gedder says it's high time the government tackles climate change.
I think there has to be more awareness of what's really going on out there, except, instead of, thinking about money all the time, or, how we can dam this and, get that water or dig a hole in the ground. And
Queensland contributes about 20% to Australia's annual GDP. Mining, farming and cattle ranching are among its biggest industries and biggest polluters. Critics say lobbyists working for these sectors are keeping the government from taking steps to protect the environment because it hurts their bottom line. Yet a growing number of farmers say they want to make their businesses more sustainable.
The fact that agriculture, while it has been and still is largely accused of causing land degradation and ultimately and contributing significantly to climate change, agriculture and the management, particularly of our soils, is the solution also.
And they're not the only ones calling on the government to crack down on pollution. Many first-time voters say they'll support the party with the best plan for fighting climate change.
Because we have the power to move beyond coal, we have the money, we have the people's support, but it's not happening, and climate change is upon us. People's lives and cultures are being destroyed, species of animals are dying.
Pretty worried about the climate and how that's all going and the future for that. So that's a big player, so have to look more into it, I guess.
Climate change is a really big one as well, and they're really acting on that, doing what the big government parties aren't game enough to do because they're donors.
That could hurt the current government, which has been criticised for largely ignoring climate change. Its tenure has also been marred by a housing crisis and an economic slowdown, and the uproar over the environment could create the perfect storm to bring in new leadership. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
For more on this, Steve Keen joins us now from Amsterdam. He's an economist and an honorary professor at the University College London. Good to have you back on Money Talks, Steve. Let's start with the issue of climate change, because it is one of those perennial issues in Australian politics that comes up. Neither party seems to be able to gain traction on it. What are the two major parties promising on that front?
Well, they're both promising to meet the Paris Accords, but one is saying they want to do it more by market mechanisms. The other is trying to set effective targets. And there's an enormous amount of distortion by the Conservative Party, otherwise known as the Liberal Party, about what's being implied by the other. For example, one of the policies for the Labor Party was that 50% of all new cars would be electric by 2030. And what the Liberals are saying, what the Labor said is they want 50% of all cars to be electric by 2030, which is absolutely not the same thing. So it's being used as a political football rather than a serious topic.
Let's move on to other economic issues now. The issue of negative gearing seems to be a hot one, with the opposition Labor Party promising to scrap it, with the Liberal Party saying that that will lead to higher house prices and higher rental prices. Explain to us firstly, what is negative gearing and why is it such a big issue in Australia?
Yeah. Well, in most businesses, if you're running a business and you've got a cost like interest payments, for example, on that business, then you can write the interest payments off against the income from that business, but not from other activities you might have. In Australia, with negative gearing, if you are losing money on your rental property, so you're paying more to service it and more to maintain it, more interest payments than you're getting back from the tenant, you can write that loss against all of your income. And it's an enormous subsidy. It's something it would be in the many billions of dollars, subsidising effectively property speculators. The only way they can make money, of course, they're losing money on the business, on the property as a rental business. What they're hoping to do is to make a gain on capital appreciation with rising prices. But for about 2 years now, house prices have been falling.
Interesting. Now, the opposition Labor Party says that policy of negative gearing has prevented a lot of younger Australians from entering the housing market, whereas the government, the Liberal Party, says that's actually helping to increase supply in the country. What's your view on it? Is negative gearing a good or bad thing?
It's a very bad thing, and in fact, that the Labor Party brought it in the first time round. One of the failings of the Hawke-Keating government was the decision not to abolish negative gearing. So both parties are responsible here. Far from increasing the supply, the vast majority of money from negative gearing is going into buying existing properties, which drives up the prices and actually takes stuff out of the first home buyers market. So it's a very, very negative policy. Rather than making housing more affordable, it's made it more expensive. Rather than increasing the supply, it's just driven up prices.
Okay, and who do you think has the upper hand here? Do you think most Australians will go with Labor on that issue or with the government who's promised to keep it intact?
Well, it's very divisive because the Liberals are alleging it will help cause brass prices to fall further. I think that's quite correct. So you have a divided country on that front. The current housing owners, the so-called baby boomer generation, of which I'm part, but here I'm a trader, want to see house prices get back to rising. The younger generation, which can't afford to buy, and wants to see them fall. So it does divide the electorate fairly substantially. But I think given the current climate, people will go with Labor rather than with Liberal.
And we can't let you go without reflecting on Bob Hawke, the Prime Minister, who, as we know, has just died. Explain to us the economic legacy that he's left behind.
Well, Hawke and Keating led deregulation of the Australian economy, and I'm actually a critic of that in many ways. I think that actually led to the decline of the manufacturing sector. But it certainly meant, for example, one important part of that was removing the peg on the Australian dollar, letting the Australian dollar float, which gave the Australian economy more flexibility than it had beforehand when there was a downturn in mineral prices. Rather than facing a financial crisis, it just faced a devaluing currency. So there are many elements of his legacy that I like, but I'm afraid I find a lot of the industrial policy is lauded by both sides of politics, and that often is a danger sign.
Okay, Steve Keen, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks so much again for your time.